The books that I read in July, it was all over the place, but I am finally caught up with all of my arcs that I need to read. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today we're going to be doing my July wrap up. Before we get into the books, always make sure that you like and subscribe. Check my description box for links to all of my Patreon, Bookish Box Ambassador link, Pango Books account, and so much more. Now let's just get into all the books that I read because it was a wild ride. The first book that I read in July was called Kissed by Shadows by Rosa Lee. This is an extremely dark romance. It is a why choose, deals with the mafia. It is a quick read, but there are so many trigger warnings in here that I highly suggest checking those out before you go into it. We start off the book with our girl. She is raised in a mafia type environment. I don't think that her father is part of the mafia, but he deals with the mafia a lot. And he ends up selling her to the Russian mafia. And it's not good for her because whenever she arrives home, she sees the head Don of the mafia for the Russians there. And then his son is who she grew up with, and she's always had a crush on him. Her father texted her and said, "I am sorry, but I had to give you to the Russian mafia, and I also sold your virginity." Our girl is trying to figure out a way to get out of this. Her best friend, who she grew up with, who is the son and heir in the Russian mafia, he ends up getting her to escape, takes her to the Shadows, which have twins in there that are from the Irish mafia from both sides. So he thinks that she's going to be well taken care of and kept protected because the Russian mafia is not going to want to go up against the entire Irish mafia. So he leaves her there. He tells her that he will come back for her. Our girl is not having a good time. Things happen. The two twins and of course the head of that mafia, they get a little spicy, and the story goes from there. I absolutely loved this because even though it was extremely heavy on the spice and extremely heavy on the dark elements to the romance, the plot is amazing. I honestly can't wait to see what happens in the next book. I really enjoyed this. I feel like this would be something where you would go into it, don't really expect a whole lot. It's not going to be an expansive world or a extremely gripping plot. Definitely go in knowing that this is just all the spice, all the dark elements that you would want. But surprisingly, the plot is there and the plot is good. So I'm actually excited to continue. The next book that I ended up reading was The Never King by Nikki St. Crow. This is actually quite a fast read because it is under 200 pages. It's kind of like several novellas mixed into one that make an overarching plot. Again, this is an extremely spicy romance, very dark themes in here. Again, check trigger warnings. But basically every girl in the Darling family ends up going insane or crazy because Peter Pan comes and takes them on their 18th birthday, and whenever they come back, they are kind of psychotic, talking to people in their head. They're not fully there. So our girl has been told this her entire life. We start off with her on her 18th birthday. She doesn't believe that any of this is going to happen. She thinks that's when her psychosis and everything is going to start coming together and she's just going to lose her mind. However, Peter Pan is real and he does take her to Neverland. There are the Lost Boys. They are depraved, they are dark and gloomy and all the things you can think of. There is a whole plot going on, a whole story, and it is absolutely wonderful. It deals with a lot of dark themes. Again, please check trigger warnings. I was thoroughly shocked that this was such a good read in under 200 pages. I can't wait to continue that series. I really want to know what happens. I want to know what's up with Pan trying to find his shadow. What does that have to do with the island itself? When does Captain Hook come into this? There are so many questions that I have, and I can't wait to get to those. The next book that I read was A Kingdom This Cursed and Empty by Sassia Stark, which is book 2 in the Kingdom of Lies series. I wanted to finish up this entire series completely because book 4, the final book, just came out at the end of May. However, I needed to catch up on my arcs, and I was sad about that. This story picks up right where we left off from the first book. Our girl is trying to figure out what she's gonna do about being on the run. There are so many elements that she's dealing with, but the romance is romancing. Okay, I'm here for it. I am here for all of it. I can't wait to get to the next book because it left off on such a cliffhanger. I feel like this was such a better book than the first one because we are expanding on the plot. The world is opening up. We got to know our characters a little bit more. What drives them? What motivates them? Why are they in this situation? I am thoroughly shocked how much I liked it because the first book I wasn't fully there for. This one has me hooked, and I can't wait to continue on. The next book that I read was my arc of Dishonestly Yours by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is the first book in the Webs We Weave, I think, series, and I don't know if it's going to have an overarching plot or not, but I have never read from Krista and Becca Ritchie before. I know that they have the Addicted series that everybody loves, and I wanted to get to those. However, after reading this book, as good as it was, the plot, everything about it really kept me interested. I don't think that I really like their writing style or the way that they tell their stories. I was invested. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what was going to happen, how we're going to get out of this situation. It's a very good book for a series starter. I think anybody who probably have read the Addicted series by Krista and Becca Ritchie are absolutely going to love this book. I just don't think that the writing style really was for me. It didn't really make me want to go off and read the Addicted series. I know it's a very loved series, don't get me wrong, but I need to know when something is just not for me. Dishonestly Yours deals with friends that grew up in the thieving world, as we will say. So our girl is best friends with the other girl from the other family because their two moms grew up together, had babies together, best friends. They are kind of like the mastermind in these heists and the way that they take money and they thieve from people. So the children, of course, are all in it. Our girl has two brothers, and the girl's best friend has a brother as well. Well, she has been crushing on her friend's brother for years, and whenever they go into these jobs, she's acted like she is dating him, married to him, different things. Well, our girl's friend decides that she wants out of this business, shall we say, wants to move up to the New England area into a very small town because she's a book reader and she just wants those vibes. She ends up talking her friend into doing that. So they move. The guy comes along because he's like, I need to make sure you're okay. Things happen. She doesn't want to lie. She wants to live an honest life and make a name for herself there, but just the lies keep coming from day one because now she's divorced from this guy and she's like, can we just get out of this? I really enjoyed it. I really liked how everything kind of went and the dynamic between them two. I think the plot really held my interest. I just don't think I'm going to carry on. The next book that I ended up reading was my arc of Under the Oak Tree, Volume 1 by Suji Kim. I thought this was going to be a graphic novel. I was very surprised when it was not. So it is a lengthy novel where it goes off of the graphic novel. It's just in novel form. And it is a fantasy romance. It has so many dark themes in here, you guys. Like, I don't know. This cover did not make me think dark themes. However, there are dark themes in this. We meet our girl from chapter 1. She has a stutter. Her father thinks that he can just beat the disability out of her, which is absolutely terrible. She is being forced to marry this knight named Riften. After their wedding night, he just goes off to war and is gone for 3 years. So that's kind of like the prologue, chapter 1. 3 years go by, Riften shows back up. She's terrified of him because her father keeps telling her that he's going to divorce her, marry the princess, all of these things, and that basically she's going to be shamed and shunned, and she doesn't want to stay in her father's house anymore. This poor girl has been beaten to an inch of her life so many times by her father and everything. Her stutter hasn't went away. Riften comes. He basically tells her, you're gonna come back to our castle where you should have been this entire time. He takes her back to his place. She's terrified of him. She's like, you know, I just got to make sure that I keep him happy. I don't want him to divorce me, all of these things. And there's just like that miscommunication trope going on, which I really don't like. She gets to his castle. Things are not as good because not everybody is as warm and inviting as she thought they would be, but our girl is okay. She's dealt with so much more. This story, it has dragons, werewolves, who knows what else. I can't wait until volume 2 comes out. This was an amazing fantasy romance. As soon as I finished up my arc of it, I pre-ordered the book that's coming out in September, and I pre-ordered the graphic novel that's the bind up of the entire first season. I can't wait. I am just hook, line, and sinkered into this thing. So if you want a fantasy romance that is really, really good and definitely different than anything you've read before, definitely go pick up Under the Oak Tree. The next arc that I read was The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, and this is a cozy fantasy dealing with like being in a library, being with, you know, kind of your family and everything. It had so many cozy vibes to this. If you like cottagecore, you like fantasy, but you want something that is not high stakes, something that really isn't, you know, going to keep you on the edge of your seat, definitely pick up The Spell Shop. It was not for me. I am not a cozy fantasy girly. I keep trying to read cozy fantasies and I am just not intrigued. I get bored. I don't want to read them. I need something that's high stakes, or I need a lot of romance into it. I need something that's going to make me want to keep turning the pages. But I think that you would really enjoy this if you do like cozy fantasies and you do like those types of stories where it's not a lot of high stakes. You can just kind of sink into it, just relax, kind of go with the flow. It is a beautiful book, don't get me wrong, beautifully written and everything. It just wasn't for me, sadly. And then, of course, the next book that I read was another arc, and that is The Haunting of Hecate Cavendish by Paula Braxton. This, again, did not hit for me. The writing is good. The pacing and the story and everything is good. It is just one of those cozy type reads that not a lot of high stakes is going on, not a lot of romance, not a lot of anything. It's just kind of like a day-to-day life almost. And while that is appealing to a lot of readers out there, it is just not appealing to me. I felt like the gothic-y vibes were there. I felt like, you know, you kind of wanted to know what was going to happen. It was just in kind of a cozy setting that really didn't keep my interest. So I highly suggest, again, if you like those cozy fantasies, definitely go try this out because I think that you would really like it. After I had back-to-back cozy fantasies that really didn't keep my interest, I was like, I just need a dark romance, one that has so many unhinged trigger warnings, and I got that with Church by K.G. Roos, I think is how you say it. This is book 1 in the Chapel Crest series. Whenever I say it's unhinged, it truly is completely unhinged. It is dealing with a girl who, in the first chapter, is nearly killed. She somehow survives. I still don't understand how she did. But ever since then, she just doesn't want to talk. So it's not that she can't talk or anything. She just chooses not to. And she's like 10 or 11 when this happens. She doesn't communicate whatsoever. She doesn't shake her head. She doesn't text. She doesn't write things down to communicate. So she is just there. Now, granted, you're in her head, so you know that she knows what's going on. And she does want to talk, but she's fearful of it, so she doesn't. And her mother gets married to a guy who is very religious, all about the church and everything. So he thinks he's going to beat the demons out of her, which is horrible and terrible. This girl has already been through so much. Absolutely. And now you're putting that on top of it. Then he ends up sending her for her senior year up to Chapel Crest, which is north from where they live by a few hours. And this is a religious school that is also an asylum. So she gets there, still not talking, right? And he's like, you guys can try to get her to talk. She has demons in her. All of a sudden, the Watchers, they are these 4 guys who basically run the school. The security doesn't even try to keep them under control. The whole schooling system doesn't. They just run things there. Our girl ends up catching the eye of these boys. They're ruthless. They're mean. They do so many bad and wicked things, but they want her. Not just one of them, all of them. So yes, this is a why choose romance. I ate this book up. I loved it so much. I feel like if you like your why choose romances and you like a very unhinged plot with a lot of dark themes, definitely go check this out because it is phenomenal. I then ended up finishing up my Patreon book club pick, which is A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. I did end up reading the 5th anniversary edition, which is the white cover, because it comes with a little novella afterwards called Love Whiskey. Also, you get a little bit of bonus content that you don't get in the normal book. I hated this book and loved this book all at the same time. So many mixed emotions. Miscommunication trope is the biggest thing in this book, and it made me want to throw it. I wanted to scream at the characters. I was so frustrated, but so in love with this story. I cannot explain that any better. Our girl basically is in high school with her best friend. A new guy ends up coming to their school. He's a year older. She wants to call dibs on him, as teenage girls do, but her best friend ends up getting to know the guy and dating him, so she keeps her feelings kind of under wraps. She ends up getting really close to him. They become really good friends, and then whenever she goes to college, he's at the college as well, and she didn't think that he would be because he was supposed to be somewhere else. They run into each other again, things start happening, romance is happening, and then of course another miscommunication thing happens. So much time later happens, and then they run into each other again, and it's just over and over again for 10 years. And I'm like, you know, at this point, you guys either tell each other how you really feel or just stop. But I loved this story, especially at the very end. Knowing how the author did this was absolutely amazing, and the novella really filled in a lot of blanks that I didn't know. So this is a contemporary romance. There are a lot of dark elements to it, so make sure that you check your trigger warnings. This is a sad book. This will definitely get you in your feels, but I highly suggest it. The next book I read was for my fantasy bingo card, which is Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. This is a standalone book that is set in the Crowns of Nyaxia world, but it is not in the Nightborn kingdom. This is in the Bloodborne kingdom. So good. Our girl at a young age ends up trading her sight for things, and now she doesn't need her sight. She wears this like, you know, red bandana around her face. She is wanting to or needing to kill this really high up vampire in the Bloodborne society. Ends up falling for him. Things happen, you guys. It is unreal. real. I loved this book. This was the last book I needed to read before the new one comes out in that new duet at the end of the year. I ate it up. The first 20 to 30% I was kind of on the iffy side because I was like, I'm really not into this story. I'm not getting the characters. I'm not understanding what we really need to be doing. Something clicked. Like around the 40% mark, just something clicked. And I could not put this book down. I was so excited, and now I'm very desperate for the new book to come out. The next book I read was The Keeper of the Bees by Meg Castle, which is the second and final book in that duet from The Blackbirds of the Gallows. This book follows different characters. It doesn't even have anyone from the original story in here, so you don't have to read it if you don't want to. I really enjoyed it because it gives you an in-depth perspective to one of the protagonists in the original book. I absolutely loved it. I loved the romance in here. I loved everything about it. The twist that you find out was absolutely amazing. Like, I was like, okay, now I understand why things are the way they are, and I really loved it. This is a YA fantasy. There is really no spice, maybe some kisses or something like that, but it is so good. It has gothic elements to it. It's a very quick read. You definitely wouldn't understand this book if you did not read The Blackbird of the Gallows, so I highly suggest reading that if you want to read this. But both books are fast reads. They are YA fantasy, paranormal, gothic stories. The romance is there, but it's just kind of, you know, a few kisses and that's about it. It's very clean almost. I highly suggest these. I was so excited to read this book. I've been wanting to for months, and I finally got to it. The next one I read was an ARC. It's called The Frostbound Queen by Amy Penza. This book physically came out in May, I believe, but I had an audio ARC that isn't releasing until August. So I ended up listening to this. Oh my goodness, where has this book been my entire life is how I feel. The audiobook is amazing in this. You have our girl who is an elf, and which is basically a fae, right? She is part of like the Winter Kingdom. Her father controls winter with like a scepter type thing. All of a sudden her mom was giving birth and went kind of in this like stasis thing because she was so sad that she lost her child. Her father has been down by her mother's side for like 10 years, and it's wild. Like, they just get into like this stasis type thing where they can choose to talk, but they, you know, kind of just stay immobile for however long. Our guy, Ronan, I think he was part of her father's like guard, knights, something like that. He ends up being her guardian, teaching her the ways of their kingdom and what to do, and kind of prepare her to be the queen of their kingdom. But she is not strong enough to hold winter. She doesn't have enough magic. So her father has told Ronan that he can control winter and to, you know, basically protect her and be with her. So he kind of raises her, which is kind of icky in a way because he's that much older. Not like that much older, but he's old enough to teach her whenever she is underage. It got a little icky. It's a very spicy book. I do want to give heads up. But basically, he has always been saying that he's going to his estate, but he ends up crossing into like the human realm, basically. So she follows him all the time, and she's like, is he going to see a girl? What is happening? We're not supposed to be over here. She ends up going at one point, following him, meets a guy there. He is like the prince of the human realm, and she kind of strikes up a friendship. She's kind of attracted to him, ends up going back to the winter court. She ends up sleeping with Ronan because of course she's had a crush on him forever, and the story goes from there. I loved this story. I absolutely loved it. It is a polyamorous relationship. It is male, male, female, It is absolutely amazing. The story, the plot, everything about it I loved. And I can tell that they're going to be standalones, but with an overarching plot. I can't wait to get to the second book. I need to know how like the Shadow Kingdom is going to be, because I know that's what it's going to be about. You guys, this fantasy romance is really, really good. The writing could be better, but the story, the plot, the spice, the polyamorous relationship, I absolutely eat that up every single time. Definitely go check it out if you want to have a new fantasy romance that's very unique. The next one I read was Whispers of the Deep by Emma Hamm. This was suggested to me by one of my subscribers and Patreon members, Aragon, and they suggested I listen to this because it's kind of like a Little Mermaid somewhat retelling. It deals with mermaids, it deals with merfolk, all of that. It is good. I do not suggest the audio. The audio was not good, but I ended up switching over to physically read on my Kindle. I liked it. I don't think that I liked it as much as other people do, because I have found that whenever it deals with sea creatures at all, merfolk, sirens, you name it, I'm typically not invested. I don't know what it is. That is just a me thing. I think the writing was really good. I think the plot was really good. I think that everything about this is amazing, especially if you like the merfolk stories, or if you like The Little Mermaid, you like anything like that, you're going to eat this book up and you're going to love it so much. Go check it out. Again, my personal preference, it wasn't for me, but I can definitely see why so many people like it. I then read Dirty Lying Dragons by Sabrina Blackberry. I needed to get this read so I can read my arc of Dirty Lying Wolves, which is due by September. And I'm going to tell you guys, I eat this series up so much. The first book, Dirty Lying Fairies, deals with the Fae and like the Fae Gate in Seattle. It's an urban fantasy. This book is set in the same world because there is an overarching plot, but deals with different characters. And our girl is a witch, and she is running from the Blightfang, which are these wolves that are trying to take covenless witches to Apollo, who is the lord of the vampires in a certain section. So she's running from them. She ends up stepping on a circle, a ritual circle, and she says, "Take me where my heart wants to go." She ends up in like Siberia, in the mountains, in the snow with a guy. And she's like, wait a second, this is not my dad's place. This is not where I wanted to go. What is happening? So this guy is very like standoffish. He's like, why are you here? Why did your circle bring you here if you've never been here? So he's leery. Lo and behold, our guy is a dragon. He is a dragon, and she's never heard of a dragon because they don't exist anymore, or so she thought. This book is so good. I loved the romance. I loved the spice. I loved the banter. I understand. These stories originally started out on Wattpad, so I understand that they are not the best written, but whenever I say they are addicting, they are addicting. The writing isn't great, okay? The writing is not great. There are some times where I'm like, you chose those words, you chose that phrase, but overall, I can't stop reading them because I love the plot, I love the characters, I love the spice. So if you like dragons, definitely read this, but I would suggest if you do want to know the full aspect of the story, you are going to have to start with book 1 that deals with the Fae first. The next book I read was Bloodshed by Molly Doyle. I just got in this mood where I wanted something entirely unhinged. This is a why choose very dark romance. Whenever I say there's no plot, there's literally no plot. I did not enjoy this book at all. It's like you start out hearing about who the characters are as soon as they meet. Like they're supposed to be protecting her for some reason, and then as soon as one of them gets her alone, it's like just straight romance. That's all I can say. I was trying to think of a really good word to use there that was not going to get me stricken by YouTube, but basically that's all it is. So instead of watching video of it, you can just read about it if you understand what I'm saying. So I didn't enjoy this book. I was just like, I need something more than just that. I need a plot. I need what is happening. And I didn't get that. The next book that I read was Kingmakers Year One by Sophie Lark. This book is okay. And what I mean by that is it is following the descendants from the original series, the Brutal Birthright series, and they are going to Kingmakers Academy, basically, where it's over in, I think, somewhere in the Baltic or Mediterranean Sea. All of them go there to learn how to be like mafia members. And if you are considered the heir, then you're in a different section where you learn how to basically be a leader of the mafia. I didn't understand it. The romance was kind of like a friends to lovers situation, which was okay, but I didn't feel it. I really liked Brutal Prince in the Birthright series. This book, I think, is kind of like the remake of The Heir, which is the first book in that series. It was okay. I don't think that I'm going to continue on. I think Sophie Lark has great writing, and she definitely knows how to write mafia romances 100%. It just did not keep my attention. Dean is just an evil guy, and I know that Sophie Lark has said you will hate Dean by the end of book one, and that is 100% accurate, but I just don't really feel like keeping going. But if you do like the Brutal Birthright series and you do love Sophie Lark's writing, this book is amazing. Definitely pick up the special edition that's coming out in August. The final book that I read in July was another arc that I had, which was Seventh Circle by Tate James. This book is not for me. Why she calls herself Hades. I didn't understand what was going on with the Tri-State Timberwolves thing. I was lost for most of this book, and to be honest with you, I felt like some of the writing with it and some of the terminology that was used really took me out of the story. I don't know. I could have done without this book, but I'm happy that I read it because I had kind of a curiosity for it whenever it was like indie published, but now that it's being republished, I was really excited to read it and, you know, just see how it was and get kind of my toes in the water with it. And I really could have done without it. All right, everyone, those are all the books that I read in July. Are there any books that were on your radar that you are going to be reading? Have I convinced you to read any new books? Leave me a comment below of a sun, because where I'm at, we are in a heat wave right now, and it really needs to get colder. But I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!